I'm an attorney. I've been with Disability Rights California since 2000. I got involved with it because my nephew had a stroke when he was a baby. And so he doesn't have autism, but in some of the ways, when he was a child, I think he acted like a child with autism just because his behavior and anger and everything was so challenging to deal with. And to get him services that he needed, especially in school, he became a regional center client pretty easily. So first I'm going to talk about regional center and then the Department of Rehab. So regional center can be very important when you have a developmental disability. And first I'm going to talk about who's eligible. Is there anyone in here who has a child that you want to be eligible and has not been found eligible? Anyone? Okay, just a few of you. So I won't spend a lot of time on that part, but feel free to ask questions. And you're free to call our agency. We will investigate and look through all the assessments and information to see if we can help get someone eligible for the regional center. And as Steve said, you're free to call our agency about any person with a disability and a problem they're having because of the disability. So we do a lot of different things, but I'm going to focus on people with autism and developmental disabilities. Okay, so a developmental disability is you have to be under, it has to start before age 18. So you could have something happen like be in a car accident and brain damage. If it's before your age 18, you could be eligible for the regional center. It has to be expected to last the rest of your life. So autism often does last the rest of your life, but the system is slowly getting better over the years, and so it might be at a certain point that your child may be progressed enough that they would become ineligible at a certain point of time. It just really depends on your child. And it also depends on the system, and when the regional center budget is low, they're going to offer less and try to take away more, unfortunately. And the other part is a substantial disability, number 3, and I'll explain that a little later. So the different types of disabilities. So mental retardation, we do not call it mental retardation. Although the regional center and the law calls it that, we call it cognitive disability. And slowly the laws are getting changed to that name. Cerebral palsy is problems with using your body and because of your brain. Epilepsy or seizures, autism, and then the last one is known as 5th category. It's conditions that are closely related to mental retardation or that require treatment similar to that required for mental retardation. So it's been a few years ago that I did an eligibility hearing, and for a boy that back then they tried not to put mentally retarded because parents didn't want to hear it. But we were able to prove that he was mentally retarded and got him found eligible. So your school records are really important, but they're not everything. What is not a developmental disability? So something's just physical. So if you can't walk, that does not make you eligible. If you're solely psychiatric, that does not make you eligible. But usually it's about 20% of regional center clients also have psychiatric issues. So it's not unusual to have both. And the last one is solely learning disability. If you just have trouble learning English or reading or math, that does not make you eligible. It has to be substantial. So even with autism, it must be substantial. And it usually is, but not always, especially if it's a lower level than autism. You won't be found eligible. You have to have receptive or expressive language. So in other words, you can understand and or speak language. You have to be able to learn. Well, you have trouble learning, excuse me. You have trouble caring for yourself, like can't take your shower, brush your teeth, things like that. Trouble with mobility, self-direction. You can't figure out what you should be doing when and how, or capacity of independent living. In other words, you can't live on your own because you can't take care of yourself. And economic self-sufficiency. So we do have clients who are independently living, usually with some assistance, but they're still not economically self-sufficient. Cognitive impairment, it's basically, it means an inability to solve problems with insight, like a lot of us can, inability to adapt new situations, and inability to think abstractly or profit from experience. So some of this can apply to someone with autism, but not all of it. So how does the regional center determine eligibility? Well, it considers evaluations and tests. So like I said, what you have from your school, from your doctor, all of those records are important. Evaluations and tests. So then if there's some records that your child has autism, or is acting like a child with autism, then the regional center is required to do testing and evaluations and to determine whether your child is eligible. Once you apply for the regional center, they have 120 days to determine if you're eligible. But if it's a more intimidating system, then it may have to be done within 60 days if you have a risk to health or safety. So that definitely can apply to a child with autism. 2, significant further delay in mental or physical development, and a risk of placement in a more restrictive environment. So if your child may have to be placed in a care home, then, or is not lasting in your home, or you need help with taking care of your child, all of those are reasons for it to be done within 60 days. Now, services. There's a lot of different services that the regional center offers, but they don't tell you about those services. And one of your handouts says services and supports for people. It says for cognitive disabilities, but it's anyone who's eligible for the regional center. But basically, just so when you have you're meeting with the regional center for your IPP, it's important to think about what you need and to ask for it. So the regional center doesn't offer or tell you all the services available, so it's important for you to ask. And if the answer is no, is to ask why. Unfortunately, they're not always honest in what, I can say that honestly sometimes, not always, but in certain circumstances. So they need, sometimes you may need to have your child diagnosed again. They may have more than one disability and getting treatment. They may need to help with daycare, training, mental health services. There's a lot of different things. So anything that you think you may need or your child may need, it's not just your child, but they can also provide services for the parents, training, learning, and helping to deal with your child. And as I just spoke to someone before our meeting, the regional center doesn't always tell you what other services from other agencies. So one is IHSS, which is in-home supportive services. And when you have young children, it can be challenging to get it. But if you need help taking care of your child, you can be found eligible. If you're found ineligible, feel free to call our office. We'll give you information. We also have handouts and information about what you need to get found eligible. So here's other services, traveling, arrangements, habilitation. So emergency interventions, more. As you can see, there's quite a few. Medical and dental care. Currently, it really is only regional center clients that are eligible for dental care. Although it may be challenging at times for you to get it, you should be able to get it. Let's see, speech therapy. Now, talking about physical, occupational speech therapy, when your child is not in school, they can be found eligible for that. But if it's related to school and it's what the school should be providing, then the regional center does not have a duty to provide it. They should help you get it through the school, but the law changed a few years ago, making only the school responsible for certain things. So there's definitely less services you can get when your child is in school, but you still can get behavior training, which can be really, really important, especially for a child with autism. And as you see towards the end, next to the end, it says supported and sheltered employment. So both the regional center and Department of Rehab, both are supposed to help with employment. Sheltered employment, the law is definitely changing in that area, so that to limit sheltered employment, because there's regional center clients that make 50 cents an hour, up to above the minimum wage. So they're working on changing it for people to be making minimum wage, but it partly depends on the person's ability to work. And so I'll be discussing that more with the Department of Rehab. Some more services, social and sociological services, which can be really important. Sometimes, locating a home if you're having to move, they definitely can help you. They're supposed to help you find a home. Training, as I already think I mentioned, training for parents. So if you're having a struggle with knowing how to deal with your child, you should ask the regional center for training to help you. And it should be listed in your individual program plan, IPP. Now, if they say that you cannot get the service, then or they say that you're not eligible, I recommend that you ask why. And that you ask for what's called a notice of action, which means that they have to give you a notice of why they will not give you what you requested. So if you requested some kind of training or something, and they say no, say, I want a notice in writing. When you get the notice, you can file for a hearing and appeal it. And one of the reasons I say that is in the past when the law changed on what was available, and there were exemptions, but the regional center didn't tell anyone about exemptions, but just told parents they couldn't get the same respite they got before. And so that was wrong to just reduce the respite with no written notice and not giving the laws that explained what exhibits there were. So I know that can be very important, especially when you have a child with autism. And so one of my clients, he's 44 with autism and he can be somewhat violent. He hit me in my office, so he definitely had problems, but they restricted his respite, and because he met the exemption, I got him more respite, which was really important for his mother. And especially, I think she's 70 now, so it can be really needed. Okay, so fair hearing, I mentioned it a little bit already. So anytime that you disagree with what the regional center is saying or claiming, you have the right to request a fair hearing, which is basically to appeal and to have a judge determine who's right and whether you're entitled to it or not. And as I explained, they must give you adequate notice. So it needs to be a written notice sent by certified mail to you. And it's 30 days prior to the action. So if they're going to reduce your respite, it has to be at least 30 days beforehand. And they have to explain why. Why are they reducing it? What has changed? Has the law changed? Your child changed? You changed? And they are required to state what the law is. So it's really important to read the notice. And you can also there can also be a notice that you're no longer eligible for regional center services. And I'll go through that a little later. Okay, so adequate notice. So it tells you what they're going to be doing, the basic facts. So, the law has changed, you've changed, whatever the basic facts are. The reasons for their action, the date that it's going to take effect, and also they have to give you the information on how to file an appeal or request a hearing, and the rights you have at a fair hearing. So they're required to give you quite a lot of information, and when you request it, they're really good about giving it to you. If you don't request it, well, And if you just agree to what you say, and they get you to sign that you agree, then they don't have to give you any written notice. So it's partly up to what you do. Aid paid pending. Here's the good part. So if you're getting something and you get the notice of action that they're going to reduce it or take it away, you have 10 days to request a hearing. If you requested the hearing or appeal within 10 days, then you get aid paid pending, which means you continue to get that service. And you continue to get it until there's a decision. And I'm going to go through that for you. So there's different ways. First is in voluntary informal meeting. There's mediation and fair hearings. So I'm going to go through each one of those. The voluntary informal meeting is your meeting with just the regional center. They'll have a staff person who's in charge, who kind of acts like the judge and makes a report and a decision of what the regional center is going to do. So that can be helpful or not. It just kind of depends. Sometimes they just want to get more information from you. So it's kind of, you need to also get more information from them. Why are you doing this? What has caused this? What's the law? So you have an absolute right to ask them questions. Let's see, the decision of the informal meeting, it's given to you within 5 working days. So you'll get the decision. You do not have to participate in the informal meeting. It's totally your decision. It can be helpful because you're seeing their side, that you may be able to convince them, but it's totally your decision whether you go through that. The next is mediation. And my experience with Alta Regional Center is that if they don't think they can resolve it at mediation, they say no, and they do not go to mediation with you. So my experience is, it's not a guarantee, but it's a possibility that you'll resolve the matter at mediation. I recommend that you go to mediation, but again, that's your choice. The regional center has 5 working days to either say, yes, we'll go to mediation, or no, we won't. The mediator is usually an administrative judge, and they are the ones who run hearings. So they can be helpful in explaining the law and helping you resolve your dispute. And I mean, they know what they would do as the judge in the hearing, so they can kind of drag either side towards a resolution. And the mediation is normally required to do it within 30 days. You can request an extension, and it can be granted if there's a good reason for extending it, or if the regional center agrees with you. Now, the fair hearing, that has to be within 50 days of the date of your requesting the hearing. And again, you can have it continued. So you really have to be able to present your side of the story, to understand the law, to explain to the judge why you think that you're going to win, or you should win. You also have a right to question the regional center staff that are there, and they also have the right to question you. So they're going to ask you questions that they think will help you lose and help them win. Then the judge can also ask you questions. which can be helpful or not. It kind of gives you an indication of what the judge asks you, of kind of where the judge is at, or the judge doesn't have all the information that he needs. You can write a declaration. So if you have someone who has information, but you can't have them at the hearing, or it could be your doctor or someone, you can have a declaration written and turn that in as evidence. So that can be helpful. It could be like a school teacher or doctor, or someone else who has information. So those are accepted and can be helpful. So resources. So as I told you, you can access our publications. So and there's our website, Disability Rights California .org. You can also call our office, or you can call the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy. It's part of our agency, but they only represent people with developmental disabilities. Either you're trying to become a regional center client or you are. So, but they definitely have expertise in that area. And then the last area is called CAP, or Client Assistance Program. And that's our program that assists people who are dealing with the Department of Rehab. So anytime you have a problem with the Department of Rehabilitation, you can call our office and talk to our CAP staff, who can be helpful, answer questions, explain the law, and can help you deal with different problems. Other resources. So the first one is the Office of Administrative Hearings. So if you want to file the appeal or request the hearing, you can go to that, go there to access it. The next one is the California Department of Developmental Services. So if you have a question or complaint about the regional center, you can call the Department of Developmental Services, and on some instances they will help you, and others they won't. But you can also file what's called 4731 complaint when the regional center or one of their agencies that are providing services, if they're not obeying the law or doing what they're supposed to be doing, you can file a complaint, and the Department of Developmental Services can help you with that also. And then the last one is Department of Rehab. Our part of it is called CAP. So the purpose of Department of Rehab is to help people become employed and self-sufficient. So it's one of the things with being a regional center client and Department of Rehab is Department of Rehab may refuse to give the service to you. And I'll go into that later, claiming that you are not self-efficient enough to become an employee. And if that happens, please call our office, because we can help you with that issue. Sometimes the regional center and Department of Rehab work together to help you become employed. So it is a service that both the regional center supplies and the Department of Rehab. So they can do it separately or together, one or the other. So just so you know, you can go through both. Okay, so there are phases of the process. First is the application. So you can apply for Department of Rehab services on their line, or you can call, or you can send a letter. So there's definitely different ways to become eligible. So first you apply, then they determine whether you're eligible, and then the next is an IPE. So education is IEP, Regional Center IPP, Department of Rehab is IPE. So as you can tell, they're all similar but different. And then they'll determine the provision of services, and you can get college education, different types of education, and training to do a job and to get a job. So the ultimate goal, though, is to be employed. And then they help somewhat after you're employed, but that's pretty limited. But if you lose your job, then you're free to go back to the Department of Rehab to get another job, or it might be a different kind of job. So the application, like I already said, you can apply online, or you can mail it, or call. So if you don't have access to the internet, feel free to call. Or you can also go to the local Department of Rehab. There's a couple of them here in the Sacramento area. And you have to give the information needed to start the assessment. So again, what your school records can be helpful, so can regional center records be helpful, and other information. Okay, who's eligible? So you have to have a physical or mental impairment. So you can be eligible for the Department of Rehab even though you're not eligible for the regional center, because it could be many different levels of disabilities, but you have to have some type of impairment and a substantial impediment to employment. So you need help getting employed. And a need for services to prepare, secure, retain, or regain employment. So if you need any of those, that can make you eligible, and you can benefit. So this is the argument they use when you're a regional center client, that you cannot benefit, which is normally not true. You can benefit. If they claim that, we can definitely help you. Okay, so evidence to determine ineligibility. They can determine that you're ineligible by showing clear and convincing evidence that you are not capable of benefiting from their services. But they must conduct an assessment of ability by the use of trial work experience. So they may have you try different kind of working, and they can also have someone working with you and teaching you. And they can have an extended evaluation to determine if you can benefit from their services. So not all regional center clients can benefit, but most can. Okay, who's presumed eligible? If you're on SSDI or SSI, you're presumed eligible. However, you still could be found ineligible if they provide evidence that you can't become employed, even with their services. So it really takes them some time to prove that, and you do definitely have the right to appeal that. Also, when you're a student and you have not graduated from high school, then you transition into DOR, Department of Rehab, and at ages 16, the school should be determining where you want to go. What do you need? Do you need Department of Rehab services to help train you to have a job? So even if you don't graduate, they still can provide those services. Some schools don't, but they should. And I think the law is getting more adamant about doing that. So as long as you're an individual with a disability, and you have to have a disability to be in special education, so that should make you eligible. Okay. So DOR, Department of Rehab, they make a determination regarding eligibility normally within 60 days. So once they get your application, it's supposed to be within 60 days. But under certain circumstances, it can be extended. So like when they're having to do the trial work experience, that's a valid reason for extending whether they're going to find you eligible or not. Also, if there's unforeseen circumstances, that can also affect it. Okay, so the IPE, Individualized Plan for Employment. So that's the whole plan, is to become employed. And there's a process. The IPE contains important information on your goal. So what is your goal? And that's one of the things they look at is, what are you interested in? What areas are you better in? What do you do more of? So they're going to make a goal of what area of work for you to do and what services do you need. So the IPE, it should be implemented and developed between you and your counselor. And you do have a DOR counselor that's who you work with. The IEP, it should be implemented, and there should be an informed choice. So you can choose what you want to do. The services provided under the plan, so these are critical components. The entity that will provide the vocational rehab services. So there's different agencies and departments that provide services. So the Department of Rehab basically sets you up for these different services, but they don't provide them. So part of it is maximizing employment. It's not intended solely to place individuals in an entry-level job. That's what the law says, but often that's how they are. They only will offer an entry-level job. And so sometimes you have to work and go through quite a lot to get, like, to go to college or to get additional training. But it can be done, just so you know. But you can also start with an entry-level job and then later get more training and to go higher up. So it really depends on who you are and what you can do. And then they're also to help you obtain employment. They'll have someone help you apply for employment, but I think some of the difficulty for regional center clients is actually meeting and being able to answer questions and to get a job. So that can be challenging, but normally you're still required to do that. I know my nephew, it took him a few years to get a job. He's 32 now, and now he just works part-time during the summer for, who does he work for? Home Depot. So at least he's doing some work, but he doesn't, and he's working, and he's making minimum wage, so at least he's getting that. But it's still not a full-time or full-year job. And a couple of years ago, he actually got his driver's license. So all things are possible. You never know. That's for sure. Because I never would have guessed that years ago. Okay, so your plan of employment. So these are things they must do. There has to be a timely manner of determining eligibility. They have to determine it within 90 days. It may be extended if they're having you do work to help determine. The IPE, it must be designed to achieve your specific employment outcome. So it's the job that you want, the work you want, the training that you want, and it should specify all of that. And it should be consistent with your strengths and resources and priorities, concerns, abilities. So they really can't just tell you what you have to do. It should also be looking at what you want to do and what you can do. So other criteria for the IPE, it includes a description of the services that they're going to provide you. And one thing, now that I'm thinking of it, Department of Rehab, you have to request things sometime before you want them, because a minimum takes them a month to provide something, and it can take a couple of months. So it's not good to request things at the last minute because they won't be able to provide them at the time you need them. Let's see, what else here? Changes, if there's changes to your employment outcome, then they need to also provide services to do that. Okay, so provision of the vocational rehab services. They must be provided as appropriate to your needs, not to someone else's needs. So it's important to make sure that you have that. They have to assist you with preparing an employment outcome and getting it and keeping it. So that can be challenging. So if that's a challenge for you, then it's important to request that. It also has to be consistent with your strengths and interests and capabilities. So they have to ensure that these services are available, assess for determining eligibility, assessment for your needs, counseling and guidance, information and referrals, physical and mental restoration services, vocational and training services, transportation. So if you can't drive, then you can get transportation. And if the family needs also services, that can be done. They also provide interpreter services. So if you don't speak English or have trouble speaking, they can have someone help. They provide reader services. That's true, they do. Teaching services, mobility, Especially if you're blind, they provide those services. So they do have special services for people who are blind or who cannot hear or talk. They also provide job-related services, employment services, post-employment services, and as I already said, you have to request that. They can help you get a license, like to drive, or a different kind of occupational license. If you need equipment, they'll also give you supplies, like to apply for a job, they'll give you clothes to wear. So there's different things that they're going to do to help you. They'll give you rehabilitation technology, so basically that's information. Transition services, like transitioning from school to working, they do that. They give consultation and other goods and services that are determined to be necessary. But you have to ask. And if you can't get it, feel free to call us. So the closure of your case is you've become employed. That's been achieved. And normally they'll close your case 90 days after you get your job. So unless you need some more help, it'll be closed. But you can always go back to the Department of Rehab for more services. Especially if you need another job or more training, whatever, you can still go back to them. Okay, so CAP, that's our office. It's Client Assistance Program. So we're going to assist you with whatever problems you're having with the Department of Rehab or with your worker. I know you can always ask for a different Department of Rehab worker or regional center worker if you're not getting along with them. Please feel free to request that because you do have a right for that. We are not employees of Department of Rehab, not at all. Never have been, and most of us never will be. So you can ask our assistance for anything at any time or any point. Even if you need help applying, we can help you with that. So, and here's where to reach our office. So the bottom number, the 504-5800, 5800 is our Sacramento office. So feel free to call that number anytime that you need help.
I've heard recently regarding the DD waiver that ALTA has told some education and LEAs to learn how to do the DD waiver and start doing it themselves. But when looking on all the websites for the DD waiver, it states in it that a child must be eligible for ALTA and a client of ALTA and must be assessed by ALTA. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, that's true.
So would you first describe what a DD waiver is?
Okay. The waiver is for basically it's medical services or Medi-Cal services, and you can become eligible for them when you're a regional center client. And you said they were telling the schools to apply for it? I have not heard that, so that could be something that they're trying now, but normally it's the regional center who applies because the regional center has your services, your record, and has the information that's needed.
And they're the ones that are supposed to assess for it?
Yes. And it's not hard for the regional center to assess. They normally have the information that they need. And the regional center, at least ALTA, is good at doing it because Medi-Cal and the federal government will pay half of costs that wouldn't be paid if you didn't have that waiver. So it's good for our state, and some regional centers are better than others.
So if that was something that someone's encountering, they could call Disability Rights California over this issue?
I'm sorry, call who?
Your office.
Oh, yeah, definitely call our office. I mean, we would tell you to ask your regional center worker to help you to apply. And you can also ask them if it's already done. I mean, it usually, at least Alta is really good about doing it.
Actually, it's Alta that's telling us.
Alta what?
Alta is the one spreading that word.
Oh, spreading that word. I haven't heard it. When did you hear that?
Since about October or November, that was going to happen starting beginning of January. I don't happen to work for either organization. I work for a third organization, but some of our clients are also infant program or Alta clients, trying to become Alta clients, and Alta is telling them that they will not apply for the DD waiver for students that the infant program and SELPAs have to, and they have no way of inputting into the Medi-Cal system, as Alta has, specialists that do that.
Right, I agree.
I just wondered if you'd heard of it.
I have not heard that, unless the law has been changed that I don't know of.
Right. So my suggestion would be, if that is happening, then refer the people over so that it is tracked and resolved.
I have a couple of questions about regional center services. One is, do they have any affirmative obligation to find services in the community? My example is that my daughter has a G-tube, and of course they're saying I can't have regular respite because nobody can feed my daughter, which is another story. But the law specifically says that you don't have to be a nurse if you have, the CPR training and all that. Now, none of the agencies will do this. The regional center knows they're not doing it, and they're not even trying to put together a program. Do they have any obligations to try to get these programs in place? Because, it's authorized by statute.
They have an obligation. Often the only way to get them to follow their obligation is to request a fair hearing. Or if you have someone else that...
Well, my question is, how file it on what? I mean, because they're saying it doesn't exist, so we're not...
But they have a requirement to provide respite, and when they're not providing it...
Right.
As an excuse that they can't find anyone, then you go and ask a judge to order them to make it happen. And then you can have it happen.
Okay, and a related issue is...
Even just filing the fair hearing can be enough to make it happen.
Okay, because I'm thinking, because I don't have any notice of action, because they're saying that they're not denying the service.
Right, they're not denying it, but they're not providing it.
Right, so do I just file a fair hearing without a notice of action?
Yes, you can, absolutely.
Okay. And then the second question is, I know my daughter is a regional center client, obviously, and I've also requested some other services, and they say that they're looking. Is there a time frame that they need to find these services? Because it's been going on for a couple of months now.
Unfortunately, that's not unusual, and on some services, there's a wait to get the services, so sometimes you do have to wait.
Okay, so there's no time limit like the 120 days?
It's not the same, and it also depends. I mean, again, you can ask a judge to order, especially if it's really essential to get it. Yeah. But there's some services like ADA or other services that they're having trouble accessing them, and sometimes you definitely have to wait. It's not unusual to have to wait like 6 months. Okay. Has anyone had to wait for a service? Yeah, it's pretty normal.
Yeah, I have a question. Roberto's, my son has been through the process somewhat with DOR, and I don't think that they've actually followed very well at all the process that you just outlined of what their responsibilities are. He has another meeting next month. Can I ask for a CAP representative to go into the meeting with us?
You can. Whether you'll get that or not, I don't honestly know.
Okay, so, but I can actually request another DOR representative.
Oh, yes.
And that they can, then they'll be forced to leave his case open until a new representative can be placed with him.
Yes. Are they wanting to close the case?
Yes, and like I said, the process that you just outlined that DOR is supposed to follow, it doesn't appear to have been followed, so.
I've heard that complaint numerous times. Unfortunately, you do have the right to appeal and request a hearing, just like you would with the regional center if they're saying, you know, that you should no longer be getting it, or they're not providing what they've said they would provide.
Okay, great, thank you.
And you can also, this is for your child, I assume. So you're free to go with your child and to take notes, and to keep and make sure, you know, any records, you have a right to records from the Department of Rehab. They'll tell you things that they want, but they don't remind you. And if you don't do it, you can end up with nothing. So it can be challenging. I know that, unfortunately. And is your child a regional center client? Yeah, so you can ask the regional center to also help, because they do work together, or they can work together.
I just have a comment, and that is one of the things that you've talked about throughout the process has been the fact that that oftentimes people have struggles to get higher levels of service, going to college or
Yes.
advanced kinds of work opportunities. And it's very difficult to go against a large agency like the Department of Rehab as a family member or as a person with a disability. As people are going through that process, can they call you and kind of step by step throughout the process receive assistance?
Absolutely, call our office. Yeah, I'm not in our CAP department. I've handled it in the past, so it wouldn't be me. And it partly depends on where you live, but absolutely, please call our office.
I just had a question about if the individual's conserved or unconserved. How does that affect them if their family or somebody in the community wants to help advocate for them with like a big giant place like the Department of Rehabilitation? Are there any limits as far as release of information or any consent forms that have to be completed before a parent can go in with a grown child and ask about information that's private but pertains to them?
Well, if the child is there and you're the conservator, the child is there and can give you give permission for them to give you the information. I honestly don't know if you have to sign when someone's the conservator. You have it partly depends on what kind of conservator and what your rights are as the conservator. So the best way is to have the child sign that the information can be given to you.
Okay.
It's just, that's the best way to make sure it happens. And it's the easiest way.
If the person is not conserved and the family member wants to be part of the process, and obviously the person with the disability is in the office, does the family have the right to be there?
Absolutely. You have the right to take anyone you want to take to support you, both the regional center and the Department of Rehab. And I definitely recommend that you do that. Someone to take notes for you, help you ask questions, whatever. You're absolutely entitled to that, just like you are with special education also.
I would like to ask one follow-up about college. A number of the parents who I'm working with right now anticipate that their adult children with disabilities will be attending college and would like some assistance from the Department of Rehabilitation. What kinds of things, are you familiar with the types of things that the Department of Rehabilitation can do for that?
So as far as college goes, it's what kind of job do you want and what do you need to get that job? So if you need college to get the job that you want, then they can provide the college for you. So it depends on, and is that a job that you could do? Can you go through college? Okay, but anyone with a disability, I highly recommend they go to DOR to go through college to get a job, because they will pay for it. I mean, you have to go through the process. It takes you time. So don't ask a month before college starts. Believe me, because it won't happen. It'll happen the next semester or the next school year. It definitely takes time to make it happen, but it definitely can happen. Has anyone gone through that or had problems getting that? Yeah, there can be problems with getting college. It's not always easy, but it definitely can happen.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.